On December 29, 1972, Bob Marquise was piloting his airboat to look for frogs in the Everglades along with his friend. Both the sawgrass patches and the shallow swamp pools were easily navigated by the boat's smooth flat bottom. Marquise was a retired fish and wildlife officer who was in his 40s. He had recently turned to commercial frogging after years as a state game officer. Shortly before midnight, Marquise saw the light of a large airliner. He didn't think anything of it, as jets were frequently departing and landing to and from Miami. The Everglades played a crucial role in the approach system, but what he didn't know was that above him, a holiday tragedy was about to occur. After an eventful flight from New York, Captain Robert Loft, First Officer Stockstill, and Flight Engineer David Repo were guiding Flight 401 toward Miami International Airport. 13 crew members and 163 passengers were on board the large aircraft. Just after 11:30 p.m, the pilots informed the tower that they would have to circle because the light indicating whether the plane's nose gear was down had not illuminated. Air traffic controllers gave their approval and instructed the crew to maintain a 2,000-foot altitude. Repo went below the cockpit to inspect the gear after the pilots activated the autopilot. When one of them bumped a steering column, the autopilot disengaged and Flight 401 began to descend slowly. A half-second chime signaling an altitude change went unnoticed. The crew received permission to return and make another approach about 20 miles west of the airport. The pilots realized they were only a few feet above the Everglades at that point. At 9.5 seconds after 11:42, on the night of December 29, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 crashed into the Florida Everglades at a speed of 225 miles per hour. Marquise saw a fiery orange flash from 10 miles away from the crash and sped towards it. Before getting further into today's video, thank you so much for hanging out and watching today. My name is James and this is the restricted section. We upload 3 times per week. If you enjoy stories like this one, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads. I know this can be annoying, but it really does help with the algorithm. If there are any stories you would like to see in future videos, please put them down in the comment section below. At the location, he heard a voice screaming, "I can't hold my head up anymore." He could see everyone still fastened to their seats, some of them face down in the water. Marquise tirelessly rescued survivors and transported rescuers from the water. He suffered burns on his face, arms and legs, but he persisted in taking people in and out of the crash site that night and the next day. By Saturday morning, the full horror of the scene had been revealed. To understand the size of the Everglades, imagine a land area half the size of Connecticut, flooded by a foot of water and overgrown with impenetrable sage. The swamp was slashed by the left wing of the plane, and that point was marked by only 2 small pieces of metal. Then, 50 feet away, 3 massive swaths appeared, as if a 3-bladed plough had gouged the soft mud and sawgrass, forming 3 canals. The first pieces of small engine parts and an oil cooler were found at the end of the canals. Aside from that, there was an engine mount frame, a port engine fan case, and an oil scavenge filter. A section of the left wing and the port engine were 2 football fields away from the point of impact. Among these were the bodies of the deceased, many of which had been ripped with strange, long slashes. These ribbon-like wounds were later discovered to be caused by the sawgrass's edges. The day following the crash, however, the main concern was why the tragedy even occurred. At the outset of the investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, only knew that Flight 401 had vanished from the traffic controller's radar screen at 11:42 p.m, that the weather and visibility were ideal, and that it was the first fatal accident involving the new wide jumbo jets. The NTSB's experts would need to put in the necessary time, effort and precision. They would be looking for information not only about the L1011 crash, but regarding future safety as well. And then there was the removal of the deceased. It took a lot of time. The identification of the bodies was hard, as many of them were unidentified and without clothing. The first basic summary stated incorrectly that 80 people miraculously survived the crash and 97 passed away. The count had shifted by late Saturday. Only 75 survivors could be identified, with 28 of them in critical condition. Captain Loft died in the wreckage of the flight deck before he could be transported to a hospital. First Officer Stockstill was killed on impact and Flight Engineer Repo was evacuated to a hospital, but later died from his injuries. Most of the deceased were passengers in the aircraft's midsection. The deceased bodies were numbered, and whatever clothing and identification they had slid into the bags with them. Helicopters continued to land and take off, transferring bodies to ambulances and hearses, which then transported them to the county morgue at Jackson Memorial Hospital. The morgue was small, barely big enough to hold more than a dozen bodies. Large refrigerated trailer trucks were rented and parked in the hospital parking lot. Families and friends were asked not to come until they were notified. At the time, it was the highest death toll of any single plane crash in the United States. The final tally showed that 101 people on board the aircraft passed away. 75 people made it out alive. 67 of the 163 passengers and 8 of the 10 flight attendants. 60 of these involved serious injuries. 17 involved slight injuries or none at all. The Everglades soft mud and waters were credited for both a relatively high survival rate and the failure of fire to spread beyond the initial flash when fuel vapors ignited. In addition, many lives were said to have been saved thanks to the sturdiness of the seatbelts, the durability of the seats, and the body structure of the enormous plane. 6 people survived in row 15, sitting side by side across the plane's beam. 2 people on the right were unharmed. A person in row 18, seat E, passed away, but his companion in seat F lived, and everyone in row 33 passed away. Many of the people who survived remained fastened to their seats, but many people who passed away also did so. Each passenger appeared to have picked up on a different aspect of the collision. Before impact, several passengers, including the passenger in seat 7C, felt the plane's nose lift and heard an engine roar. The passenger in 15H felt a violent shaking and disintegration of the aircraft. Then he realized that his seatmate appeared to be on the ceiling. Not everyone recalled the brief moment of fire. Shortly after the crash, on the same day, the flight crew was laid to rest. Those who survived would never be able to escape the tragedy of Flight 401. It would live on in their thoughts and dreams forever. Theories were being formed even before the flight recorder printout and voice tape transcription were completed. Everyone agreed that the crew was preoccupied with the warning light issue, and that the plane had somehow deviated from its altitude without being noticed by them. Nevertheless, the crew was skilled and knowledgeable, having logged countless hours in the air. The plane was equipped with a warning chime that would activate if it deviated from its designated altitude of 2,000 feet. Not to mention the standard altimeters, there was the autopilot, which had its annunciator signal to show the altitude it had been set for. The airplane had no fundamental issues. The structure or power systems of the plane were in perfect working order, and it complied with all applicable laws and regulations. The L1011 has remained a favourite among pilots over the years as it has magnificent performance. The L1011 was spacious and quiet. Its large jet engines were actually the quietest in the aviation industry. It was even nicknamed Whisperliner. The direct lift was incorporated into the design of its wings to eliminate aggravating approach turbulence. Instead of just the aft part of the rear stabilizer moving, the entire stabilizer moved with the controls. This enabled safer, nimbler control. Additionally, it was fuel efficient, using only 51 gallons per passenger as opposed to the older jet's 65 gallons. It was claimed that Captain Loft, First Officer Stockstill, and Second Officer Don Repo had shared the same level of adoration for the aircraft as the other flight crews. After the gruesome crash, Flight 401 would have a profound effect on the aviation industry. Numerous Eastern Airlines employees claimed to have spotted Repo and Loft's ghosts on other Eastern Airlines flights over the course of the following year. One particular account was by flight attendants who claimed to have seen Robert Loft pacing the aisles of the aircraft just before takeoff, chatting with other passengers and urging them to get off the aircraft before it was too late. Then it was said that Loft's supposed spirit disappeared into the air as they prepared to take off. It was so bad that the flight had to be cancelled that day because the crew was so clearly shaken by the incident. While opening an overhead bin, a flight attendant on another New York to Miami flight discovered Loft's face gazing back at her. On another flight, the entire Eastern Airlines cockpit crew claimed Repo was seated nearby and warned them about a faulty electrical circuit, which was later discovered and fixed. Even an Eastern Airlines vice president saw Loft on a plane preparing to take off from JFK. During a routine flight, he assumed the man sitting next to him was the captain and began speaking to him. The strange truth didn't dawn on him until halfway through the conversation. Loft was the man who was sitting silently and staring at him. When the vice president realized what had happened, the man sitting next to him had vanished into thin air. Another report came from a flight attendant who saw an engineer repairing an oven in the plane's galley kitchen. When the flight attendant noticed a different engineer who usually worked that shift, she inquired as to who the new guy who fixed the oven was. He insisted that no other engineers had been on that flight and that the ovens that had been reported to him were in working order. The flight attendant's description of the mysterious engineer struck a chord with several other members of the crew. They showed her several photos of a man, and she insisted that the man in the photos was unquestionably the man she saw that day. All of the photos were of flight engineer Donald Lois Repo. It's worth noting that almost every report from both Repo and Loft featured incidents involving what appeared to be flesh and blood individuals rather than spectral entities, but Repo appeared to be the more daring of the two ghosts haunting these flights. Another fascinating fact is that whenever they were spotted, they would frequently warn crew members of impending problems on a specific flight. They were almost acting as omens for a disaster or preventing it entirely. During a TriStar 318 flight, a flight attendant saw an apparition of a man who warned her and several other crew members to keep an eye out for possible fires on the plane. The flight engineer had known Repo in real life and was certain that the apparition before him was the man himself. The apparition vanished quickly. The plane experienced major engine problems halfway through the flight, resulting in a fire. The flight's final leg was cancelled. The final interesting element of nearly every report is that Repo and Loft were never seen together on any flight or in any witness testimony, leading one to believe that they were working alone to haunt these flights in the lingering spiritual purgatory high in the skies. Whatever the case, the airline had suffered as a result of the ghost's presence. The US Flight Safety Foundation received so many reports that they even responded in their newsletter, stating that the reports given by the pilots and crew were significant in their opinion. But Eastern Airlines did everything they could to distance themselves from these reports, not wanting to be known as the haunted airline, nor bringing any more attention to the Flight 401 tragedy. Employees in Eastern Airlines who reported sightings to supervisors were usually referred to the company's shrink. The ghost stories eventually became so widespread that Eastern Airlines management allegedly threatened employees with termination if they were caught spreading them. It was rumored that Eastern Airlines had allegedly salvaged parts from Flight 401. Many of those parts were installed on Eastern Airlines Aircraft 318, another L1011. Coincidentally, the majority of the ghost sightings occurred on Aircraft 318, but regardless of where Eastern Airlines stood, eventually all of the salvage parts were removed from the aircraft, and neither Bob or Don were ever seen again. Parts of Flight 401's ruins can also be found in Ed and Lorraine Warren's Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. An original floorboard from Flight 401 rests in the archives at History Miami in South Florida. Many believe that the piece is cursed. On his 1979 album, Three Hearts musician Bob Welch of Fleetwood Mac recorded a song titled The Ghost of Flight 401. Bud Marquise, who died in 2008, was recognized for his heroic acts. He was awarded an Airboat Hero Award a year before his death. Survivors were extremely appreciative of Bud for saving their life. One survivor who had been carried to safety by Marquise once showed up with a $1,000 check. Eastern Airlines, on the other hand, sent Marquise $125 because they thought they'd hired him for the rescue. Marquise returned it to the now defunct airline's Miami headquarters. After extensive labor disputes and a massive strike in 1989, Eastern Airlines went out of business in 1991, but left the crash and mysteries of Flight 401 to the world. Once again, thank you so much for hanging out with me and watching today. My name is James, and this is the restricted section. We upload 3 times per week, and if you enjoy stories like this one, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications and all of that annoying stuff so you don't miss any of our future uploads. If there's any topics you'd like to see in future videos, please don't forget to let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.